afternoon. Hopefully, is the board okay with that?
Sure.
All right. So, first of all, any announcements from the commissioners as we go into commissioners' business? Okay. We'll move into the adjustments, and why don't we take the NDAA one first? And I think because Mr. Kyler has some dates that because it was I thought a very good discussion last week. Turns out is the U.S. House has already voted. Is this correct? And now the U.S. Senate is scheduled to vote a week before, or right before Thanksgiving. So if we're going to do something, we got to do something like quickly. Is that correct?
Chair Lakin, that's correct. I looked into that issue that was brought up last week about the sections 1021 and 1022 of the 2012 bill. That's a bill that gets reauthorized annually. The House has already voted on their version of the 14 bill, and Senate is rolling theirs out. What I've been told is it would be the week before Thanksgiving. So my recommendation, if I could make one, is that given the quick turnaround here, that we handle this sort of the traditional way that you've corresponded with members of Congress, and that is write a letter to the Senate delegation outlining your concerns with that provision of the 2012 Act, and then maybe sort of some general principles with respect to the assumption that the bill will go into some sort of conference committee.
Okay. Any thoughts, Commissioner Stewart?
I guess, is it possible, if it's going to be a letter and the reason is timeliness, that there's a possible decision next week, it sounds like, towards the end of next week? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
could be
you know, is it possible to have we do have a meeting next Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a draft letter for approval and timeliness? I still feel that, you know, if the Senate doesn't act, that maybe we consider, you know, watching it and consider, you know, a work session like we talked about before.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen?
The origin of all this comes about in the National Defense Authorization Act, and that's an annual decision that Congress makes about how much to authorize for the military. It was originally placed as an amendment to that law a number of years ago, and so it's something that expires whenever the Defense Authorization Act expires, and it is then put back into new Defense Authorization Act. So in a certain sense, there's always a deadline because it's going to be expiring and probably renewed. The importance of what we're doing, it seems to me, is to put something beyond an individual's opposition to some of the more intrusive parts of what this law does. So I would actually prefer that we just take our time with it, recognizing that Congress has already reauthorized this law several times, and what we really ought to do is raise the profile of the issue and come to some agreement on what we want our resolution to say. And I think that it could be quite powerful in terms of taking the time to actually go through it. Whatever they're working on now will expire, and it'll be again before Congress. So it is an ongoing fight. And by the way, the federal courts are now split on whether this is or is not a violation of the U.S. Constitution. Section 1021, I believe it is, has from the original, when it would originally passed in 2012. Is been ruled as unconstitutional. So, you know, this is wending its way through the courts. It's constantly being brought up in the Congress, and our own Senator Wyden is one of the leaders on the issue. So I guess I'm agreeing with Commissioner Stewart that we ought to have the work session.
Commissioner Bozovich?
Thank you. I think, what we want to try and do is be effective at the moment. The House has passed their version where they tried to eliminate that section unsuccessfully, but they did at least get some changes in wording that are a little bit more acceptable. What would be great is if we can convince the Senate to maybe go beyond the House's version, and then when they get into conference, they could resolve that. The most effective way to do that, given the timelines right now, is for us to authorize Alex to draft a letter to come back to us next week under consent calendar, possibly to approve for the chair's signature from the entire board to our entire Senate delegation. And if we wanted to, we could copy it to the rest of the senators. We don't have time to act effectively in the way of a work session and preparing a complete resolution in time for the Senate vote on this matter, because it is an annual authorization. I was the one that introduced Shane and the folks at PANDA to Commissioner Sorensen in the first place. This has been an issue that I've been paying attention to for quite a while. In fact, I've been paying attention to issues like this clear back to the original Patriot Act that I wasn't exactly in favor of at that time. This is an important issue, but I think we need to try and be effective immediately. We've been fairly effective with some of the letters we've written Congress. We've got, plenty of attention on everything from the Siletz tribal land issues to forest issues, where we've gotten the attention of the Congress with letters. And I think this would be the quickest, easiest way to do it, if we can get the three head nods to give Alex the go ahead to draft something for the board, for the chair's signature, and we can approve that next week. We've got a fairly short meeting next week because of the AOC meeting. We're trying to hold the time down to that meeting, but we have a couple necessary pieces of business we have to get done prior to the Thanksgiving holiday break. So I think that's probably the most effective way of doing this right now. That doesn't preclude, if the Senate doesn't, act in a way that we want them to act, and they don't get a decent bill out of a conference committee, to move ahead with something else. And that can be something as all the way up to, having a work, we can have a work session and look at passing a resolution that also deals with nullification, issues. That's something for the future. More immediately, though, that we have an opportunity to effectively lobby our delegation, and I think a letter is the most effective immediate use of our staff's time and our time at the moment. We'll always have the opportunity to come back and hold a work session later.
So I guess Commissioner Stewart and then even Commissioner Sorensen, would you be, satisfied if we were to do a letter now and then schedule a future work session?
Sure.
That meets my expectation, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think three head nods in on the letter. Looks like you have that. And then to Ms. Hayes, then we'll start preparing to schedule a future work session on this topic. All right. Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we'll take up the next adjustment.